Actually, I don't think I've ever told this story before. That set in motion a few years of drinking on and off. It wasn't until a few years after that for me to figure out, like, why did I do that? My tendency is when I get some years behind me, pride and ego. And when I'm noticing one day, like, hey, I haven't prayed in a couple days, something like that, it's a sneaky, sneaky thing. At least for me, that's like a warning. When that starts to go, it's always like the canary in the coal mine. Was flying my dad out to New Orleans. It was for my birthday. It was actually a pretty big deal. This is a couple years after my mom had passed away. My thing was taking my dad on trips. He's an older guy, and I didn't know how many more years I would have with him. So my thing was, a few times a year, I'd take him on trips with me. At the time, I lived in LA. I sent him some tickets to meet me in New Orleans. He'd never been there before, neither had I. I got us an Airbnb. So I'm like 7 years sober, and I booked my flight 2 days before he was supposed to meet me there. I just wanted a couple days to myself. It was the strangest thing though. So I got there, and I'd been on trips with my dad before. I mean, I'm 7 years sober, so I'm used to taking trips sober and not drinking, not using drugs. For some reason on this trip, I got there and it just had a different feeling to it. I don't know, I felt sad or despair, or I felt there was like a dark feeling, an uneasy feeling. Long story short, the night before my dad flew in, I ended up having I'd ordered a shot of vodka. I only drank half the thing, and it felt so surreal. And I'm like trying to notice if like the beast kicks in, where I go on this bender. I'm waiting for that huge rush to hit me. Or anyway, later, I'm walking home. This is in New Orleans, so you can like walk around with your alcohol. So I have like this half a shot of vodka in my hand still, and I just throw the thing out. My shadow, right? That part of me felt convinced that, hey, it's been so long since you've had a drink, maybe your biochemistry has changed. I mean, I knew better than this. There's a part of me that knew better than this, but there was a part of me that was making the case that, look, you just had a half a shot of vodka and nothing happened. And I woke up the next morning, my dad flies in, I do a normal afternoon of work before I take him out to lunch. I work for myself, work remotely, I can work anywhere. Later on that night, the plan was to take him out to dinner, and then they have a casino there. It was like this trance. I wasn't really checking in with anybody. Not that you necessarily always have to, but no matter how much time you have sober, you should probably check in with somebody if you're feeling weird. And I didn't do that. Actually, I don't think I've ever told this story before. And I dropped him off at the slot machines, gave him some money to play slots, because I like to play blackjack. And right before I got to the blackjack table, I diverted off to the bar and got me a double vodka, go over, start playing blackjack. I proceeded to play blackjack and pretty much drink all night. That set in motion a few years of drinking on and off. It wasn't until a few years after that for me to figure out, like, why did I do that? I mean, it wasn't just as simple as, okay, I was feeling weird and I didn't check in with someone. Why was I feeling weird? Why was I feeling the way? And it wasn't just weird, it was something really deep and soulful. It wasn't just a passing mood or something. Finally, what came to me was my mom had already passed, and she was the closest person to me on this earth. And my dad and I finally started to get close together, and me taking him on trips and trying to cheer him up because of mom passing, and us just spending a lot of time together and having good moments together. I was professionally starting to do well, so I had the resources to do this. My entire life before this, I'd been broke. This was a period where my main business was about to take a dive, and I knew it, and I wasn't going to be doing so well financially. For me, I felt like I finally earned my dad's respect and his love by taking him on all these trips and showing him I had made something of myself. And so that part of me was just deeply scared, like I don't know if I'm going to be able to take him on these trips anymore. Will he be disappointed in me? Will I, and it sounds crazy to think, oh, well, why would your dad stop loving you? But that's the little boy in me felt like that. The little 5-year-old Chris. That's the reason why I was feeling like this dark despair, because I was scared of losing him. Because most of my life I was at odds with him. Most of my life I had wanted to make him proud, and I wanted him to love me, and I wanted him to express love to me. He's old school, so they don't really show it outwardly. So here's the other thing about this though. I did have a sponsor at the time, but an obvious question would be, why didn't you call your sponsor? At this time I was in AA, so this was the stretch of sobriety I had when I did it through AA. There's this really common, I call it I got this syndrome. When you get some time behind you, or when I get some time behind me, My tendency is when I get some months, when I get some years behind me, pride and ego. And the thing is, I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling confident about your recovery, but there's being overly confident and there's being just stupid. Because I had to do a deep dive on myself and figure out, why did this happen? And I don't ever want this to happen again. What do I need to do in the future? I put together some notes on sort of my own case study here, and hopefully you can learn from it too. But, and part of the question here is how can I preemptively remove this pride, this ego barrier that can happen when someone starts feeling confident, someone starts getting some months of sobriety, starts getting some years of sobriety, and just a part of them feels like, I don't need to do this anymore. I don't really need to do that anymore. When the truth of the matter is all those things, all these these daily rituals, it holds the whole thing together. In the beginning of sobriety, you should do more. It requires more effort. There is a sustained effort. And so an analogy would be, let's say I'm not in shape. I don't work out. At the beginning, it's going to take a lot of effort to get into shape. But then to stay in shape, I have to continue to put effort and time into the gym. I don't just say, okay, I'm good, I'm done, and never go into the gym again. Recovery is like that. Pretty much everything in life is like that. I'm more on the team of you're either growing or you're going back. You're either moving forward or you're going back. Maintenance is really not the right word here. Another thing I want to talk about is how do I install sort of a mental emotional alarm system? Because a lot of this stuff is subconscious. And that's like shadow work stuff.
Carl Jung talks about two types of shadows: the personal shadow, the unknown dark side of our personality, and the collective shadow, the unknown dark side of society. Starting with the personal shadow, Jung calls it the thing a person has no wish to be. It represents unknown or little known attributes and qualities of the ego. It is the sum of all those unpleasant qualities we like to hide from ourselves. The shadow contains inferiorities which everybody has but prefers not to know about. They seem weak, socially unacceptable, or even evil. The shadow is most visible when one is in the grip of anxiety or other emotions, under the influence of alcohol, etc.
And that's why shadow work is important, because we can bring more of that stuff to light, have more of an awareness about it. One of the things I do, it's like a nightly inventory. I actually do a nightly inventory with that AI thing. Daily meditation and prayer is critical. Just having that connection to the sacred, to the divine, to God, to source. When I'm noticing one day, hey, I haven't prayed in a couple days, something like that, it's a sneaky thing. At least for me, that's like a warning. When that starts to go, it's always like the canary in the coal mine. Yeah, another thing is checking in, having a group of people, or at least you need a person or a couple people or a group of people. You need people to check in with. Checking in with people, they can see things. If you check in with people on a regular basis, they get to know you and your normal patterns, and they can tell you if something's off when you don't see it. They can be like, hey, Chris, man, having lunch with you today, something seems a little off with you. That kind of thing is super important. Getting people in your life that trust and love, and that know your story, you can, that's a huge asset. It's like an alarm system. Right, it's an added layer of protection. It's like, I don't know, I think of it as a spiritual alarm system. You can see things that I don't see. It wouldn't be unusual for you to think, this seems like a lot of work. And I'm not going to lie to you and say that there's no work involved, but if you had $1 billion worth of priceless jewels and gold, you inherited it, would you not spend time and resources and energy on protecting this invaluable gift, if you inherited it? Think of sobriety like that. It's really an invaluable gift, and we should be willing to go to any length. In the beginning, it is a lot. It's a heavy lift, but once you get things rolling along, it can be a very smooth ride. If anyone can relate to my story a little bit, where I was feeling this darkness and this despair, and I didn't know what it was, where it was coming from at the time, and the next thing I know, I'm in this trance, and then I'm picking up a drink. If anyone can relate to that, please share your stories. You can reach out to me or leave a comment in the video.
The potential dark side behind this line of thinking. Regarding sponsorship, the AA pamphlet says, sponsorship responsibility is unwritten and informal. That is a huge problem. That means that a sponsor can go about it in their own way. A sponsor is not a power greater than yourself. Unfortunately, some members put all their faith into their sponsor.